You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network.
There's a team that's in our hearts. We've got love that won't depart. We are always in the stands, 'cause we're super Dolphin fans. Football is mighty rough. Winning gets awful tough. We're rooting for the Dolphins. Our mighty, mighty Dolphins. We're rooting for the Dolphins. Our mighty, mighty Dolphins.
Hello, Miami Dolphin fans, and welcome to the Same Old Dolphins Show, part of the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network. I'm Josh Katzker. With me today and every day is my brother from the exact same mother, Aaron the Brain. Aaron, say hello to the people.
Hello to the people.
Brain, it's been so long since we've been on the air together. I mean, just over 24 hours.
I know. I'm sick of you already. Where do we have the candle? If the candle's not on, I don't want to be here.
I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, because that candle brought some good juju to everybody. But yes, that's we're less than 24 hours removed from when the Brain, Mike, and I were together doing a live game watch along for 49ers at Dolphins from Mike's house. And yes, we did in fact burn the Odell Beckham jockstrap candle. I believe we posted a clip as we were doing the show live. If you wanted to take a look at that, you can certainly catch the replay by becoming a member of Dolphins Talk Extra at patreon.com/DolphinsTalk for as little as $3 a month. We're going to have all kinds of great content over there throughout the remainder of the season, however long it is, whether it's 2 weeks or longer. We'll have content coming your way, and then we're going to have content coming your way all off season long as well. So you get bonus podcasts, bonus segments, and of course access to our Discord server where we've got lots of good stuff going on as well. A lot of really great conversations. And it's been a wild time because the Miami Dolphins got another win on Sunday, 29-17 at home against the San Francisco 49ers, and that kept what slim playoff hopes the Miami Dolphins had remained alive. There is a flicker of hope if that is something that you are keeping track of. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the game, and as we are broadcasting live right now for Dolphins Talk Extra subscribers, as we are recording, it is Monday, December 23rd, which means that it is Christmas Eve, and it is also the great holiday of Festivus. And we're going to be airing some grievances later. We might even get into some feats of strength. The holiday of Festivus will not be over until Aaron the Brain can pin me on the internet. So it's going to be a long show tonight, folks. Buckle up. But before we go any further, let's first have a word from our sponsor. The DolphinsTalk.com podcast network is sponsored by Caneswear. Caneswear is the place to go for officially licensed apparel for the Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, the Hurricanes, Florida Panthers, and all of the professional and college teams in South Florida. Looking for the latest jersey, a birthday gift, or the newest hat to hit the market of your favorite South Florida team? Check out Caneswear for their overwhelming selection of sports apparel. Located at 2655 South University Drive, Davie, Florida, Caneswear has it all. Not in South Florida? No worries. Visit Caneswear.com to shop their inventory from the comfort of your home, and they'll ship it to you. International fans, too. Caneswear.com is the spot that Miami fans shop. That's Caneswear.com. Caneswear.com. Brain, let's get right into it. The Dolphins 29, San Francisco 17. And frankly, this was, I think, short of the win on the road against the LA Rams, this is probably the best win of the season for the Miami Dolphins in terms of all-around performance. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair. I think the bar is not very high because it's not a team that is really,
Which I think is also a fair thing to say.
yeah, it's not like they've got a bunch of quality wins. They've beaten up on a bunch of bad teams. They've got a one win against a team with a winning record, I believe, and that was the game against the Rams. So aside from that, I would say that this and the way that they handled the Patriots would be the two, aside from that Rams game, would be the next two in line.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not that's not a grand statement about the Miami Dolphins this season in terms of the quality of the team. But I mean, it does give you a general sense of where things stand for the Miami Dolphins. And I think we'll get into a little bit of the big picture here in just a bit. But let's get into the game itself, because like we said, Brain, I think all things considered, this was probably, I think easily the Dolphins' best home game performance of the season. That game against the Rams, of course, coming on the road. But the Dolphins finally got things together in terms of the ground game in this one. They ended up running for 166 yards in this game, which is a great improvement. And as it happens, they had Kendall Lamb back. They had Teron Armstead back. And for the first time this season, they also had Isaiah Wynn in action, with he and Liam Eichenberg splitting snaps at guard at just about 50-50. Brain, the Dolphins were able to get the ground game going, which I think opened things up for their passing game, as it were, although they didn't do a whole lot of downfield passing, which has been the theme throughout the course of this season. They also got some critical drops from Tyreek Hill that I'm sure we're going to talk about. But I mean, the big story from an offensive perspective is that, hey, they finally had some success running the ball.
They did have some success running the ball. I don't want to overstate it. I think they had success in general in the game. And then they broke a 50-yard run at the end of the game that inflated the stats. At the end of the day, a 50-yard run is a 50-yard run, and it goes into the stat book just the same if it happens in, the first, second, third quarter, or it happens at the very end of the game. And so, I'm not going to take that away from them when it comes to establishing the run, especially since it's been something that's been missing, is that ability to break a big play on the ground. That said, it's not like the Dolphins were just having their way on the ground in this game. It was, they kind of struggled at the beginning of the game getting the ground game going, and then they gradually kind of figured it out. And then they got the big run at the end of the game. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from a positive standpoint for what the Dolphins did offensively, though. And I would say that bodes well going into, your last two road games in cold weather environments, and your attempt to bust those narratives, albeit against bad football teams. And then I would also make the note that I don't know that it's terribly coincidental that they got the running game going, and it was a lot more Isaiah Wynn and less Liam Eichenberg, although I will say that Liam Eichenberg played much better in this game than he did in the previous one.
He certainly did, and I think Liam Eichenberg certainly benefited from the fact that Teron Armstead was next to him as opposed to
Jackson Carman.
Jackson Carman, right? Like that is something that it's certainly something that Eichenberg has benefited from. Another aspect of the running game, and we're going to talk, we got a question from Mr. McDolphin in the chat about why the Dolphins were rotating with Wynn and Eichenberg. And I think I have an idea on that, but I want to give you a chance to talk about it. But I think another thing that I think was really effective in the running game in this one for the Dolphins was that they actually started to get Raheem Mostert a bit more involved in the running game. And it wasn't exclusively Devon Achane basically being the feature back, which I think, quite frankly, he's not equipped to be. I think he benefits from having more spells on the sideline, getting a breather. And also, Raheem Mostert is a dynamic player who, when is given a bit more run, has the opportunity to do a bit more up the field, is a bit of a more physical runner than Achane is. So, Brain, give me your thoughts on Mostert getting involved, as well as your thoughts on why the Dolphins chose to rotate Eichenberg and Wynn.
I do think it's important to get other running backs involved here as opposed to just hammering away at Devon Achane for two reasons. Number one, like you said, like because of his body, his stature, he's just not a guy that you want carrying the ball 20 plus times a game. You could look at his college career, and the more carries he got, the less efficient he was. And I think if you want to maximize Devon Achane, you got to get him in space, and you can't have your feature back be, well, we can only give him the ball in space, because then you fail to have a downfield running attack. And so I think getting back to using Raheem Mostert, sprinkling in Jeff Wilson Jr. was important. And I think that also enables Devon Achane to be more successful on the perimeter as a receiver. And this is where he's had his biggest success this season. So I think it's definitely something, we'll see. I think we'll see more of the last 2 weeks. And I think it's something to keep in mind when we go into the offseason, whether or not the Dolphins decide to bring back Mostert, or if they decide to basically give Jalen Wright Mostert's role, and then see if they actually bring in somebody that can handle the downfield, and maybe that is Jalen Wright, or maybe it's getting another bigger back that can handle the more between the tackles running. I think that's just something that just remains to be seen. We'll see how they decide to tackle it. As far as the rotating of the guards with Wynn and Eichenberg, I think it's a simple case of pitch count. I think it's just like with any other position, like when Jalen Phillips was coming off of his injury, they're going to give him a certain number of snaps. Calais Campbell at his age, they're going to give him a certain number of snaps. It's a little unorthodox to do it on the offensive line, but this is a guy that hasn't played in over a year. And so you could practice all you want, but you might not be in tip-top game shape. So to keep him fresh, I think they probably said, hey, we're going to give you a certain number of snaps. And so to do that, we're going to rotate you in and out. And I think in doing that, it also gives you the chance to show them on tape against the same opponent the successes and the failures of each player, the strengths and weaknesses, and they can look at them on film and evaluate moving forward. And I think when they go back and they evaluate it, what they're going to see is Isaiah Wynn ends up on the ground a lot less, has a lot more athleticism to get up onto the second level and in space, which was seen in the Devon Achane touchdown run at the end of the game, as well as an early down reception by Devon Achane on like a screen where Isaiah Wynn was able to get out in space. These are things that Liam Eichenberg can't do because he's just limited as an athlete. And so let's see how Isaiah Wynn's body recovers from his first NFL action. But if this guy is continuing to get healthier and healthier, then, I would say you're either going to see a greater proportion of the snaps go towards Isaiah Wynn next week, if not all of the snaps at that position next week.
Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, Brain, because I thought that this was another example of this Dolphins defense kind of just doing just enough. They did enough to get the job done. They forced the 49ers into a field goal attempt at one point that was missed, and that ended up being a big difference in this game. They fought hard. I thought Jordan Brooks, again, had another great game for the Dolphins until he got hurt. Luckily, he was able to come back in, so thank goodness it wasn't a serious injury. Apparently for Jordan Brooks. We don't have a big update on Kendall Fuller, who went down with an injury in this game, but it does sound like they aren't worried about it being a serious injury, but it may be serious enough that he may not play again this season. I guess we'll have to see. But Brain, the defense did enough. They hold San Francisco to 17 points. And, on a night like this where the Dolphins managed to score 29 points on offense, it was enough to get the big win. And, of course, they got the game-sealing interception from Kader Kohu. They had Zach Sealer, who continues to just be a man possessed at defensive tackle for the Dolphins. I think a pretty decent performance all around from the Dolphins defense on Sunday.
I think when you put in perspective what this defense is, the limitations that it has, I think it was a decent performance. I think there are some issues that continue to rear their ugly head with tackling that I think equate to, mistakes by the players and ultimately coaching, because look, if you're a team that consistently is a poor tackling team, at some point that's reflecting onto the coach. Whether you think that that's on Mike McDaniel or whether you think that's on, Anthony Weaver or both, that's up to you to decide. I think it probably, is a combination of both. But this is not a perfect defense. And this was not a great performance by the defense by any stretch. But I do think what this defense did in this game that they haven't done in other games this season was when it got into crunch time, the defense stepped up and played their best with timely stops, timely pressures on the quarterback, a timely interception, and ultimately, sealing the game on the defensive sealing. And it was a complimentary game because they were able to seal the game defensively and then truly seal the game offensively at a time, because, the fact is that this was a game that Miami was up 19-10 and the defense let San Francisco go all the way down the field and score a touchdown to make it 19-17. And at that point, it felt like if the offense doesn't continue scoring, we're in trouble. And the offense proceeded to go 3 and out, or not 3 and out. Well, maybe it was 3 and out, but the offense proceeded to not score the next time they got the ball. And that felt like, oh, well, for sure, the 49ers are going to get the ball back here and drive right down and go ahead and take control of this football game. And to the Dolphins' credit, the defense stepped up right there, stemmed the tide. Offense was then able to put some things together, get points on the board. Still, San Francisco got the ball back with a chance to take the lead, and the defense again stepped up and let the offense put the game away. So I think my biggest takeaway is not how the defense played as a whole, but how the defense played when it mattered most, which is sort of the least same old Dolphins thing that you could have done in this game. So that was refreshing to see.
Yeah, but it wasn't all roses for the Dolphins defense. Tackling continues to be an issue, and I think it's particularly an issue for a guy who we've criticized a bit on this show, and we're going to criticize again, Javon Holland. This is a guy who I think has probably 2 games left as a Miami Dolphin. I cannot envision the Miami Dolphins deciding that they want to give this man more money to stay in Miami to continue to play. Based on the effort that he put out and the tape that he has put out for large chunks of this season, this is a guy that is making business decisions, taking bad angles, showing lack of effort, and just seems to overall not have his head in the game. And he was one of the players, as we've talked about before, that took issue with being called soft, and he looks to be continuing to be one of, if not the softest guy out there.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm done making excuses for Javon Holland. We've seen him play at a very high level, maybe not the elite level that, he thinks that or his agent thinks that he plays at. Or people have hoped that he would play at, but he's played at a very good level. And this has been a terrible season for him. And it's just getting worse. And I don't know how if this is the effort that you're getting from him in a contract year, I don't know how you expect him to play better when he gets paid. And I don't know how you pay him what he wants to get paid. And given the track record of Chris Greer and paying players at non-premium positions, as much as I would have said prior to the season that Javon Holland is a priority, and when Jalen Phillips got hurt, and it meant, well, now you're not going to give Jalen Phillips a long-term extension, I would have said, well, then that's probably good news for Javon Holland getting an extension, because one of these guys has to get an extension. So even a few weeks ago, I would have said it makes a lot of sense to give this guy a major extension and to figure out what the dollar amount is. But at this point, unless Javon Holland is going to take a pay cut that I don't think he's going to take. I mean, it's not a pay cut because it's still a pay raise because he's on his rookie deal. But unless he's going to be willing to take like somewhere in the neighborhood of like $13 or $14 million a year, which is still a sizable investment for a safety, I just don't know. I don't know how you pay him $15, $16, $17 million a year, because he's not playing at the caliber that the guys who are making that kind of money at that position are playing. And, you know, I don't know that even if he was, that he would necessarily be worth paying that to, but you certainly can't pay it to him if he's not playing at that level.
Right. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like he's just, it seems like this is a guy who he's almost like unaware that he was playing with a major opportunity in front of him, and to take advantage of it, he just has completely failed to do it in every possible way. How much of it is mental, I think is a fair question, but without being able to get into the player's head, it's hard to say. I feel like this is going to be a situation where he's eventually going to be a guy who's going to go end up somewhere else and may in fact turn out to be something. And at that point, once he is free from the organization, maybe he's able to speak his mind and we can get a better sense of who he is and why things turned out the way they did for him in Miami. But it has just been, God, it's just, I think particularly because of how brightly he started and how like optimistic everybody was about the play that you got from Javon Holland his first couple of seasons, this year in particular has been such an enormous disappointment. And I think if you're the Miami Dolphins, the only place to go from here with Javon Holland is to just move on completely. Am I wrong?
It's a tough situation because they have to weigh a few factors. They have to weigh, number one, what's happening. Like, what's happened? Like, why did you go from being a top 5 or 6 safety in the league to being, you know, largely mediocre? You have to find the answer to that first. And if you find the answer to that, and that's something that can be reversed, then that changes the context of the conversation. And then you have to figure out, okay, well, we can figure that out, but now what's the dollar amount and what's the investment and how do we structure that contract? And then how do you also move forward without him? Because you're going to move on from Jordan Poyer. I can almost guarantee you that. If you're moving on from Kendall Fuller at the other cornerback position, while you have Jalen Ramsey, who could potentially transition into that sort of player at safety, then you have your opening holes up at 2 corner spots. Your other safeties on the roster right now are who? Elijah Campbell.
I don't even know who the other safety is.
I mean, that's basically
Saron Neal.
I think Saron Neal is technically a corner. Maybe he's a safety. I don't know. Like this team doesn't really have any depth at that position. So it's like, and in the secondary as a whole, it just becomes like, well, if you don't bring him back, what are you doing at that position? And I mean, I guess the answer is, well,
Patrick McMorris is the other safety.
Patrick McMorris was the other safety, but he hasn't played. He's played basically on special teams. I guess what you say is, well, look, if instead of paying Javon Holland a bunch of money, we can go out and sign somebody and sign like 2 or 3 guys with that money to address those positions. And then you've got your draft picks. And that's probably the more prudent move, because otherwise you're paying Javon Holland a bunch of money and you're rewarding him for subpar play. And then you still have the other holes to fill. So I just think you probably have to move on from him. I think the thing with Javon Holland, I don't think this guy is meant to play in the box. I think he's meant to be a center fielder, a deep safety, and let him make play. And I think if you put him in the right defense, where he is just simply a ball hawk and he's used to mitigate some of the deep stuff as like a lot of single high stuff, then I think he can absolutely be a very impactful player. But if the Dolphins are not playing that type of defense and they're asking Javon Holland to be a guy that can come up in the box and be a tackler, and he's just not capable of doing it, well, then one of two things has to happen. You're either signing Javon Holland and you're going to stop asking him to do that, or you're going to move on from him and get somebody else that's a better fit for the defense.
Well, listen, I don't want to waste any more breath on Javon Holland until we need to, again, because it's just been so frustrating for him. So let's move to something much more positive that we can talk about from this game. Jason Sanders. Jason Sanders goes 5 for 5 kicking field goals in this game, making field goals of 48, 33, 54, 38, and 44 yards, which now means he has connected on 23 consecutive field goals. So Jason Sanders out here trying to make an argument for himself to get a little extension on that contract, Brain. I mean, Jason Sanders, listen, I feel like he's that guy. He's just one of those guys that you can extend for cheap enough and lock down that position, and you just don't need to worry about it. And I feel like that's the kind of move that it would behoove the Dolphins to make, given how many question marks they have elsewhere on this roster.
I tend to agree. I think it's funny because a couple of years ago, we were literally sitting and doing a show about
he was
in November
problems. Come on.
In November, in November a couple of years ago, we were doing a show about should the Dolphins just cut Jason Sanders? And then last year we were doing the show about like, well, this is definitely going to be Jason Sanders' last year with the team. And then he finished the season strong. And then we said, well, going into this year, no matter what happens, there's no way they're going to pay Jason Sanders past this year. Because he's going to have virtually no dead cap. They'll just move on from him. But now he's having the year that he's having. And then you look at his career as a whole, really the last 2+ years now, when you look at like the last quarter of the 2022 season and then what he's done the last 2 seasons. And, yeah. Do you want the $4.7 million cap hit that he's carrying next year? No, you don't want that. But the way to get off of that is you could basically just extend him. I think you're either extending him or you're keeping him around for another year. But there's no way they're moving on from Jason Sanders. Because at this point, dude is, I mean, look, do I think he's a perfect kicker? No, he's not a perfect kicker, but I think he's one of the top half of he's a top half of the league kicker, and those don't grow on trees. And if you get rid of him, you can get a cheaper option. You could save yourself a few $1 million by moving on from Jason Sanders. But then you're going to be back in the position where when you miss field goals at the end of games, you're going to say, well, we really need to get a kicker. You've got a kicker, keep the kicker.
Yeah. So some other news and notes from this game, some other notable tidbits here. Tua Tagovailoa in this game threw his 100th career touchdown pass. He became the 4th Dolphins quarterback in history, in team history to throw 100 touchdowns. So he joins such luminaries as Dan Marino, Bob Greasy, and Ryan Tannehill. And I think if all goes according to plan for the Miami Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa will surpass Ryan Tannehill's 123 touchdown passes as a Dolphin probably next season. Other notes from this game, Jonnu Smith became the single season record holder for Dolphins tight ends with 76 receptions in a year and 802 receiving yards, passing Randy McMichael. And if you are interested in advanced metrics such as DYAR, he is closing in on Tony Nathan as the most efficient Miami Dolphins pass catching tight end in franchise history. So that is something to keep an eye on if you're interested in that. Another record that Tua was looking to break in this game that he didn't quite reach was he was trying to become the first quarterback in NFL history to top 70% completion percentage in 9 consecutive games. He failed to do that, so he ends his streak at 8 consecutive games, passing for 70% completion percentage. Remains in a tie with Joe Montana and Drew Brees. So pretty good company there for Tua Tagovailoa. So, Brain, based on just the statistics in this game and how the game flowed, was there anything else narrative-wise that you wanted to touch on? The Dolphins continuing to do the short passing game with the screens. I guess we should talk about Tyreek Hill and his drops because it continues to be an issue, and it was something that he mentioned specifically in a post-game interview. He said that, the vet rest days, as he said, are catching up with him. And they're causing problems, and that's what's contributing to the drops. He intimated others have intimated that might be part of the problem in terms of him running incorrect routes at some times. I even saw somebody go so far as to say the part of the when it comes to the Dolphins offense regressing, you need to look no further than Tyreek Hill and his cutting out of practice on Wednesdays. That seems a little extreme to me, but it has absolutely been a part of the problem that Tyreek Hill has just not lived up to, what you would expect of a receiver that is getting paid the way that he's getting paid.
Yeah, well, I think when you look at the Dolphins offense as a whole, and everybody talks about how it's a complex offense, right? Well, you have a complex offense with all these moving parts and all this timing and all this rhythm. It would seem to me that the only way to perfect that is to have a lot of practice. Because if it was something where it was very simple and it was just, you're going to line up and you're going to punch the guy in the mouth and you're going to run a few simple routes, that I don't think you need to practice overly, a whole lot. But the precision in the running game, blockers getting to their spots, the timing of everything, the footwork, the routes, the getting the ball out on time, guys being where they're supposed to be, the motion and everything that goes around that, guys getting lined up, all of these problems that we have bemoaned for a couple of years now that speak to a lack of precision or a lack of attention to detail can all be traced to a lack of practice. It's a lack of preparation. And so to have Tyreek Hill go out and say that, the drops, I don't know how much of that is practice and how much of that is just lack of concentration, but whatever. If he's going to say that it's that, then it, whatever, you take it. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I think there is credence to the general idea that the offensive regression has coincided with a lot of lack of preparation. And there have been multiple accounts that have said that the Dolphins don't necessarily practice the way some other coaches, the way some other teams practice. There is, a looser practice. There are a lot more guys getting days off. And I'm not saying that that necessarily makes them soft, although that's another thing that's been talked about why they're soft, because they've got all these guys taking days off. But soft or not, if guys are taking days off, then you're not getting the same continuity and you're not getting as many reps as other teams. And so when you go out there and you look less prepared, that can directly be correlated to your lack of preparation with guys getting days off. So I think it's something in-house that they need to look at.
And I would just throw this out there. Maybe Tyreek Hill is skipping some practices. Who is ultimately the person that is responsible for holding players accountable and being at practice and ensuring that everybody is on the same page in terms of how this offense functions? Whose responsibility is that?
That's the head coach.
Duly noted. Thank you very much. Maybe we'll circle back to that in a little bit. So let's talk about this game. Brent, Dolphins win 29-17. They beat the underwhelming San Francisco 49ers to keep their very slim playoff hopes alive, just so that everybody knows, because it's fairly simple. In order for the Dolphins to make the playoffs, they have to win their remaining 2 games at Cleveland, at the Jets. They need the Colts. The Colts need to lose one of their final 2 games of the season. That's at New York Giants, who are basically have been losing on purpose for the last couple of months. They're now in sole possession of the number 1 pick in the draft. Hard to imagine that they have any reason to go out there and try to win on Sunday. And then the final game of the season, the Colts host the Jaguars, who just lost to the Raiders, who had previously had possession of the number 1 pick. It's hard to see the Colts losing, but they need the Colts to lose one of those 2 games. Then they need the Broncos to lose both of their remaining 2 games, which are at Cincinnati and home against Kansas City, or they need the Chargers to lose both of their remaining games at New England and at Las Vegas. I don't see that happening. So it's just, the odds are slim for the Dolphins. They have to go win 2 cold weather games in a row, and they need either the Broncos to drop their remaining 2, which seems doable, or the Chargers to lose their remaining 2, which seems less doable. And then they need the Colts to drop one of 2 games.
They also need
all of that needs to happen in order for the Dolphins to make the playoffs. I don't find that to be, I wouldn't expect, I think their current odds, according to the New York Times, is like 8% to make the playoffs. It's not a very high possibility. The fact of the matter is, this team is not going to make the playoffs. And even if they do, their reward is likely a trip to Buffalo where they're going to get smoked. So what even is the point? The question here is, does this game do anything to change the overarching narrative for this team this season, Brain? That's my question for you.
In a vacuum, no. If they go out and win the next 2 games, it changes the narrative that that has been spouted the last few weeks, which is that this team needs to be, they're nowhere near close. The plan is flawed. It's not, you got to pull the plug, because if this team finishes 9-8, they will have done something that they haven't done, which is win a couple of games on the road in cold weather against teams that are physical teams. They're not good teams, but they're physical teams. And so that would be something. And you'd also be looking at a team that after a 2-6 start ended up finishing the season winning 7 of their last 9 games. And you'd be looking at a team that, regardless of how injury prone he is and his history of, missing games due to injury every year except for one, the bottom line is that the Dolphins would have likely, if Tua Tagovailoa doesn't decide that he wants to try to run over Damar Hamlin, if the Dolphins end up finishing the season 9-8, you could probably say that if he doesn't do that, the Dolphins end up finishing the season at 11-6. That said, even if they finish 11-6, they're still probably the 6th seed. Maybe they're the 5 seed, but likely they're the 6 or 7 seed in the AFC. And they're still probably getting beat in the first round of the playoffs. But that's not necessarily the point. The point is that if you look at this season as a whole and what it was supposed to be, given their plan in the offseason, is they were decidedly taking a different approach to not go all in and not give bloated contracts to Robert Hunt and Christian Wilkins. And by doing so, they knew they were going to take a step back in the trenches, but they were going to try to mitigate that by investing short-term dollars in other places to try to still be competitive this year, while they knew, and we as fans knew, that the ceiling of this team was not as high as the ceiling of the team from a year ago.
Okay, so wait.
I'm not done.
Wait, I just want to stop you here. Because what you were saying, what you were telling me, what you were explaining about becomes reality if the Dolphins win their final 2 games. Right?
Yes. I mean, if they lose at the Jets or at Cleveland, then obviously that's a significant loss.
Right. So, and that's why I don't want to go down the road of having the conversation that you're having right now, because it's not a real thing yet. Okay. I think there is every bit of value in what you are saying. If they go out and they win those 2 games, then let's have that conversation. But in terms of what they just did against the 49ers, that in and of itself hasn't done any of those things.
No, I mean, it's on par with the game against the Rams. You beat a banged up team that, played a bad game, self-destructed, was imploding. You took advantage of it. You won the game, but you didn't necessarily, play a great football game. You played a decent game against a team that was falling apart.
Right. So that's the point that I want to make here. And that's why I don't want to go. I understand what you're saying, Brain, and I think there is value in engaging in that conversation if and when we get there, but not beforehand. I don't want to have that conversation now because they haven't earned the right for us to have that conversation yet.
It's fair. That's fair.
So what I'm saying is that this was not a game it was another victory at home against a subpar opponent, which is exactly what this team has been feasting on for the past 2 and, almost over 3/4 of 2 3/4 year plus time. This is what this team has been doing. They've been winning these games at home. They haven't always done it this season. They've stubbed their toe. They've lost those stupid games, right? But they did go out and win this game on Sunday. So yay, hooray. They beat a subpar opponent at home. It's what they always do. Brain, this is where we need to pivot the conversation. And this is where we need to start to celebrate the great holiday of Festivus. So if you will bear with me, I would like to say a few words. First of all, welcome newcomers. The tradition of Festivus begins with the airing of grievances.
I got a lot of problems with you people. Now you're going to hear about it.
As we just said, I'm going to start with the grievances and I'm going to give you an opportunity to air some grievances, okay? But I want to start with some grievances based on what we were just talking about. The Dolphins won this game on Sunday against the San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers team that is what now 6-9 on the season. And the Dolphins won that game to improve to 1 game under 500 with 2 games to play. This is what the owner of the team and the president of the team looked like on the sideline as the game ended. Look at Steve Ross pumping his fist, Tom Garfinkel clapping their hands. And listen, they won the game. It's fun to win. It's good to cheer for your team to win, especially when you're Steve Ross's age and who knows how many more wins you're going to get to see, right? So that's fine. Good. You could cheer a little bit. That's fine. Look, and here's another view of Steve Ross with Tom Garfinkel, and in the background here to the right of Tom Garfinkel, you see Joseph Tsai, who is the perhaps the next owner of the Miami Dolphins. He is a new investor in the Miami Dolphins. And look, everybody's happy, everybody's cheery. The Dolphins won this game, right? Okay, cool. Dolphins won the game. Good. But here's now a clip that the Miami Dolphins organization churned out on social media. It's just a segment of the clip.
Man, I'm so proud. That's what.
One more ball.
Oh, we do?
One more. Mike McDaniel.
This is why you fight through. Okay? On the front end, it seems miserable. This moment, we all know we had to take this moment.
If you are listening to the podcast, you're not watching it on YouTube. That was Steve Ross in the locker room of the Dolphins after the game, giving Mike McDaniel a game ball, and Mike McDaniel continuing on with the speech. The way the Dolphins are churning out the content for this game, you would think that they had just clinched a playoff spot. When what happened was they beat a mediocre team at home in their final home game of the season to improve to 1 game under 500. That's what happened. And what I think is rubbing me the wrong way here is that the Miami Dolphins have been painfully mediocre. They have not won a playoff game in over 20 years. They haven't won the division since 2008. This team has just been just unbelievably mid for so long. And this team is celebrating like they actually accomplished something. They give a game ball to their head coach after a 6-year build of the team that has them at 7-8 with 2 games to go. They're probably missing the playoffs. There was a time, as Dave Hyde wrote an outstanding article, as he always does. He's always on the money, Dave Hyde, for the Sun Sentinel. He says, to quote from him, "I was here when Don Shula called the entire season a disappointment after losing in an AFC championship game. He says, I was here when Jimmy Johnson rebuilt the roster, made 3 playoffs and had 2 playoff wins in 4 years, and said, we didn't get where we wanted. And now he's here," he says, "when the owner pumps his fist and awards a game ball for pulling within a game of 500 in a way that suggests he's happy with management team that has had loud blunders this season." And Hyde goes on, "This didn't just happen by chance. Ross wasn't just over celebrating a win. He was making a statement he's happy with those running the team. He might hope it sweeps all questions under the rug after this season, but that's not quite as easy as pumping a fist and saying, it's all good. We're moving on." This team is working hard to tell you that everything is fine and everything is okay But, like, I mean, heck, this team fired its head coach after finishing 9-7 just a few years ago. Now, maybe there was more going on under the hood. But I don't like that this team has become a team that celebrates mediocrity. They are celebrating being mid. They are celebrating that, hey, it's not so bad. We won a game. We're within one game of 500. That is not what I want this team to be celebrating. Like, and again, I don't have any problem with cheering for a win, but pumping out that kind of propaganda when your team is on the verge of missing the playoffs and going on, 20-something years? What is it? Would it be 24 years now without a playoff win? Like, that just reeks of tone deafness to me. And it just, again, proves to me that this is a team that is the culture surrounding the team is just not a winning mentality. It is a mentality that says we accept being as good as we can be. And if that's not good enough, that's okay. And I that's not what I want from my football team. I want them to strive to be better. But what we get is a team that is just before this game, they lost 2 of 3, and the 2 games they lost were on big stages to prominent, excellent competition. And it did nothing but reinforce the fact that this team can't win those crucial games. And now they're celebrating because they beat a mediocre team at home? It rubs me the wrong way. I don't like it, and it just reinforces my idea that I don't like what this general manager has done. I don't like what this head coach has done. And while I can accept that it might be reality that head coach might be in place next year, and I'm beginning to fear that the general manager is going to be in place next year as well, I just feel like I am cheering for an organization that has a culture and accepted a culture of mediocrity. And I'm just going to have to keep taking what I'm being given, apparently, because that's what this team is. So that's the grievance that I am airing on this Festivus of 2024. Brain, do you have a grievance that you would like to share?
I do. I don't want to.
Let me play the clip one more time.
I got a lot of problems with you people. Now you're going to hear about it.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't want this to take up too long because we've already wasted enough breath on one of these guys. But my grievances have to do with specific players. And they are 2 of the players that are supposed to be the best players on your football team. And I'm talking about Javon Holland, who I think we discussed at length earlier in the show, and Tyreek Hill, who we discussed briefly and sort of let off the hook because we blamed the issues on Mike McDaniel. But the fact is that these 2 guys are supposed to be 2 of your best players on your team. You came into a season where you notably took 2 players that were potentially franchise cornerstones, one of them definitively in Christian Wilkins, one of them close in Robert Hunt, and you let them go. And so more so than ever this season, you knew that you were going to be relying on your best players needing to step up and play their best for this team to hit their ceiling. And some guys on the team have, but most of them have not. And the best player on the offense, and frankly on the team, is Tyreek Hill. This guy was voted the number 2 player in the league. Or was it number 1? Was he number 1 or number 2 in the league? In the NFL's top 100 in the offseason, coming off of what he's done the last 2 years.
Right up at the top.
He was either number 1 or number 2. We're talking about this guy's not just supposed to be the best player on your team. This guy's supposed to be arguably the best player in the league.
Yeah, he was number 1.
And he has definitively come up short, not just this season, but in every big game that this team has played over the past 2 seasons. And if this team is ever going to reach their ceiling, you're going to need your best players to step up. So I have a major grievance with Tyreek Hill because the drops, the not being in the right place. I get it. Coaching, letting him get away with stuff. I get that that's part of it. But you're the best player on the team. You're the leader on the team. You show up at practice. Patrick Mahomes got a high ankle sprain. Most people didn't think he was even going to play. Certainly, most players in the league, if he was on the Miami Dolphins, whether he plays or not on Sunday, I can for damn sure tell you that this guy is not a full participant in practice at all the entire week. I don't think that Andy Reid told Patrick Mahomes, you're going to practice in spite of your high ankle sprain. But Patrick Mahomes instead said, no, I'm the leader of this team. I can play. I'm going to practice. That's how this thing works. True leadership from your players trumps accountability from the coach. These players have to hold themselves accountable. And if your best player can't hold himself accountable, then nobody on the damn team is going to hold themselves accountable. I spent a lot of time on Javon Holland. We know all how we feel about Javon Holland. So I'm going to air this grievance to Tyreek Hill. Step up or shut up, because it's beyond me at this point. Like, you can't be that good of a player and never show up in the brightest lights.
Yep. I think that is a very fair critique of Tyreek Hill. And if this team is going to do anything in the years to come, or at least next season, they're going to need Mr. Hill to play an important role in that. So, anyway, we've aired our grievances, Brain, which means it's time to move on to the feats of strength. And the feats of strength are going to involve Costco pumpkin pie, lasagna. We've got some beef that we picked up. We picked up a roast. We're going to have the feats of strength are going to be the food that we eat in the next couple of days. Because listen, as we're on Christmas Eve, it's Festivus. We're celebrating Festivus right now, but tomorrow we shift the focus to Christmas, and the night after that, we shift the focus to Hanukkah. It's the holiday season. And as I suggested to folks online, listen, it's going to be a lot easier to enjoy the week knowing that the Dolphins won this game against the 49ers. If they had lost it, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. But the fact of the matter is, it's the holiday season, so I hope, I think I say something along these lines every year. But with it being the holiday season, I think it's important to spend some time just being thankful for the good things that you have. If it's family, friends, if it's the fact that you can hear the sound of my voice right now. The fact that you can hear the sound of my voice right now means that whatever situation you're in is not as bad as it could be. And I think it's important to take this opportunity to just spend a moment or two being thankful for all of the things that you have. I don't want to go down. I don't want to get too high and mighty here. It's the holiday season and all of that. I don't want to get too preachy on everybody. But I do think it is time. It's just a good time to spend a moment to be thankful. So I want to take a moment to say how thankful I am for all of our subscribers here at Dolphins Talk Extra. I want to take a moment to say how thankful I am for everybody who has listened to the show in podcast form or watched us on YouTube or left us an angry comment or left us a comment of support or in agreement or whatever it was. If you're listening to the show, you're interacting with us in any way, I want to take a moment to say thank you. I want to thank Mike at Dolphins Talk for all of the work that he has done to give us a platform and to help us along on the entire team at Dolphins Talk with Tom and Marissa and Ian and all of the folks that we've worked with on the website that are even no longer on the website. Our friends, there are still friends that are there, Dante Colinelli and Kevin Dern and all of our other friends who we've worked with, our buddies at Go Time Dolphins. We're thankful for everybody in this Miami Dolphins community online. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say I'm thankful for you, Aaron, my brother from the exact same mother, who we now find ourselves 20 years later once again living in very close proximity to each other, which is something that I'm very, very thankful for and very, very grateful for. And I'm glad to have you here doing this show with me all these years later. Who would have thought that, all those years ago when we started, when we had like 5 people listening to us, that we now have 15 people listening to us. It's really fantastic how we've grown over the years. That's like 300% growth. That's really tremendous. It's really fantastic. So I'm happy to be doing the show with you, and I'm happy to be much closer to you in real life, that we were able to actually get together at Mike's house together yesterday. It was really great. And I'm glad to have you and your wife here in close proximity to my family here in New York. It's really something. So I'm lot to be grateful for this holiday season. So I'll hand the floor to you to let you say a few words here before we call it a night.
Oh, how do I follow that? Thank you first and foremost. And I just, to echo the sentiment, obviously, to all of the listeners and the viewers, subscribers or not, anybody that takes time out of their week to listen to us. I mean, when we started doing this show and you said we had like 5 listeners, and we would routinely get like 20 people, and we knew like half of them, like personally. Even then it was like, wow, I can't believe that these people would listen to us to go on for an hour about sports or wrestling or about the Dolphins or whatever we were talking about, whatever nonsense. And, obviously, we grew, and then, obviously we are forever grateful for Mike, to put him on the network and really expand our audience, and to watch that continue to grow in this partnership that we've had with the Dolphins Talk network, and the great friends that we've made and continue to make. I think it started as, hey, this is a fun thing that we do together to talk about the Dolphins, because let's be real, like, we're gonna end up bitching about the Dolphins anyway. So if we're gonna do it, like, let's do a show about it, and let's make it a thing. And the fact that we're still having fun and we're still doing this, as long as we're still having fun, and the Dolphins make it challenging. I'm not gonna lie, it's not always fun, but it's still fun because of you, because you're my brother, and we're going to bond over this in misery or in joy. And we're going to get this stuff off of our chest. We're going to vent about it. We're going to bounce things off of each other. And at the end of the day, it brings us closer together. And isn't that what sports is supposed to do?
I couldn't have said it better myself. So from Aaron the Brain and myself, thanks everybody for listening. We hope that whether you're celebrating this week or you're not celebrating this week, that you take a moment to just be grateful and thankful for all of the good things that you have. We wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa. If you're not celebrating anything at all, we hope you have a great week, and we'll catch you later this week. We're going to be back on Thursday to preview this upcoming game against the Browns and all that entails. And then, we'll keep churning out as long as this thing goes. And then even once it stops going, We're going to have a lot to talk about all off season long. We're not going anywhere. So everybody have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season, a wonderful week. Take care of yourselves and each other. And as always, go Dolphins!
This is the only show where we can call Javon Holland a see you next Tuesday and then on the next show profess our love to each other.